bless you. The trick is type 2 error sometimes is important too. So the next thing I want to do right now is I want you to tell me about these types of error that we could make. I mean, think about it. These are little kids taking this medicine, yes? And we're basing the marketing of this medicine on the results of this test, probably. And as Linda pointed out earlier, every time you do one of these tests, you might be wrong. And there's 2 ways you can be wrong. Why are there 2 ways you can be wrong? Why are there 2 ways you can be wrong? Alan?
You could say that Prevnar works, but it doesn't. Or you could say that...
Good.
Yes.
Switch does and doesn't.
Yeah, Prevnar does work, or it doesn't work, and it doesn't.
Nice! So you can give it, yes, good. Now we're gonna, what Alan just gave us is a perfect modular baseline for a false positive and then a false negative. You hear what he said? He said, you say Prevnar works when it doesn't. That's a false positive. Now don't write this down. We have to make it more succinct for the, we have to define work. That's why I'm saying Alan gave us a nice template to work off of. So Di pointed out, wait a minute, we got to be careful about what we say. With Prevnar, it's not that Prevnar works. It's that saying Prevnar makes infants have a different loss of appetite rate when in fact it doesn't have a different appetite rate. I know it's a lot of words. It's a lot of words. You got to think about what are you testing in this test? You're testing whether or not Prevnar results in a change of loss of appetite. A type 1 error would be saying, yes, we have a different loss of appetite. But you actually don't. You just think there is because you got outlier data. You just got outlier data. So that's a type 1 error. False positive.
Wait.
Saying, I'm just saying it again.
Okay.
I'm just saying it again. 5 or 6 times. It's okay. Saying Prevnar results in an appetite loss change when it actually doesn't. When it actually doesn't. False positive. So that's why, Alan, when you said saying Prevnar works, the definition of work is change in loss of appetite. So saying that, when in fact there is no change in loss of appetite. That's why I want to make sure we define what work is. And hey, just think about this too. Make sure you define when you're doing your study what a loss of appetite is. How are they getting that from these kids? Think about that. How are you measuring loss of appetite in an infant? Think about that. I have no good answer for that. I have no good answer whatsoever for that. I mean, how do you check if an infant's hungry? I mean, Max cried a lot, but sometimes he cries because he's eating cat turds. Sometimes he cries because he's wet. Sometimes he cries because he's hungry. I mean, why is he crying? Is he crying because of loss of appetite? Think about that, you researchers to be out there. You got to make sure you define those things well, yes? Was it a measurement? Maybe it was a measurement, like blood flow to the stomach or something like that, in which case I trust it as long as it's reliable. But you got to make sure you're defining what loss of appetite actually means. 120 out of 710 is great, as long as it's legitimately measured. Good! So what's a type 1 error? Contextually saying? Good! Saying the rate of appetite loss changed when it didn't. Okay. What's a type 2 error? Saying it does not cause a change of appetite, when in fact it does. Yes. So in other words, missing it. The first one is crying wolf. Type 1 error is crying wolf. Yes. Oh God, Prevnar. Oh, wait, just kidding. Wrong. That's type 1 error. It's usually noisy. And when I say noisy, it gets published. Type 2 errors are usually quiet because they don't get published. It's failing to cry wolf. Everything's fine, here comes the wolf eating your baby. Sorry. I'm not pick on wolves. I love wolves. But failing to cry wolf, type 2 error. Everybody make peace with that right now. Make sure you can tell me what each of those are. And I say that, we're going to do this every single time we do a hypothesis test, because it's crucially important every single time to decide which one you can live with more than you can't. So type 1 error, saying the appetite loss has changed when it hasn't. Type 2, saying the appetite loss has not changed when it has. McKinnon, go.
Type 1 is false positive.
Yes, sir. Type 1 is a false positive. Type 2 is a false negative. Ask more questions if you got them right now. Which one do you think is worse? I love this. Dissension among the ranks. There is no one correct answer for any of these, FYI. When I ask you, well, there's a correct answer for what define the error. I mean, that's definitely defined. But as far as which one do you think is worse, I hear type 1, I hear type 2. one of the votes, some people would like to vote neither or I can't decide. I'm making you pick. So each one of these, you have to pick one and you have to justify it. Even if your justification is, I really don't have a huge opinion about this, so I don't like false positives or something along those lines. But in this case, what do you, I heard type 1. Why is type 1 worse, in your opinion? If you pick type 1, Linda, go.
They taking the medicine and wasting their money and putting that in their child, when in fact it doesn't even work.
So in other words, if we say the rate of appetite is worse when it actually isn't, it might color how we use it. Okay, now, or we have a side effect on there that might make us not use it. Maybe now that is now listed as a side effect, might cause appetite loss.
Why give your children something they don't need?
Well, that's the thing, is we wouldn't know they don't need it, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Maybe that
They're
wouldn't.
saying if they're saying that it works, but actually it's
If we're colored by the side effect, that might warn us off of using it. Because if we say like, oh my God, little Johnny doesn't eat anyway, this is going to make it worse, you might warn off the drug. The drug might actually work brilliantly, especially, what is it again? I forget what Prevnar does. Meningitis. I mean, that's something you don't want. And it might work beautifully to fight meningitis, but you may be warned off by the appetite loss. You might look for other avenues. Good. So vote for type 1. How about type 2? Who says type 2? Mel, please.
I just have a hard time with using all this money for a study and you just throw it away.
Yeah, right? See, this is the problem with type 2 errors. Negative test, it's a false negative, yes? There are two kinds of negative test results. One is a true negative, which means we ran a study. Prevnar is exactly the same as every other competing medicine. We landed somewhere over here, and we're on this curve, which means we have shown, statistically, it looks like Prevnar and its competitors have the exact same rate of appetite loss and everything's fine. But you're never going to see it published. That doesn't get published. Negative test results don't get published, unfortunately. Even if they could be false negative results. That's the problem. That's one of the problems with the journals. They've always looked for small p-values. They figure small p-values are the only ones worth talking about. Well, the thing is, a big p-value on this curve might very well be a tiny p-value on the other curve, right? If that other curve is way the hell over here, that would be a small p-value on that curve, wouldn't it? So you'd miss it. You'd miss the negative test result, call it false negative, which would be a type 2 error. So, yes, I agree. And why else would a false negative be potentially harmful from a kiddo's point of view, Katie? Yep. See, this kid's taking Prevnar, fighting meningitis, and inadvertently getting appetite loss. Because remember, a false negative means you said there was no change in appetite loss, but there was. And that change might have made it worse. But the poor kid doesn't know that that's happening. Yes, very good. I got two problems. I think you guys hit the big problems with type 1 errors in kiddos' medications. The type 1 can color the use of it, and the type 2 can encourage the use of something you might not want to encourage the use of. That's why I tell you to pick. Pick which one. Stat test books never ever hit on which one do you think is worse or which one do you want to fight. So let me ask you guys a further question. I want to keep planting this seed in your mind. I want to make good researchers more than anything. If type 1 error, if you are who said type 1 error is the worst? Type 1 error is the worst. Okay, my friends that are type 1 errors. How do you minimize type 1 error? Raise your confidence. It's the Carly rule. If you think type 1 error is awful, type 1 error is the area in the tails, yes? It's the area in the tails of the null curve. If you want to decrease type 1 error, the only mathematical way to do it is to make that area less. Make the area less. Well, that means push the confidence interval out. What does pushing the confidence interval out mean? You're raising confidence. Oh, good. We'll come to that. Yes, ma'am. You're correct. No, you're correct, Emily. I was just getting you one thing at a time. Raise your confidence. Type 1 error, 5%. The reason it's 5%, you're at 95% confidence. If you want to make type 1 error 1%, you got to make your confidence at like 99. If you want to make type 1 error 0.5%, you got to make your confidence 99.5. They're related to each other like that. They're related to each other. Good. So who said type 2 error was the worst? Okay, type 2 error is the worst. How do we fight type 2 error? We make it smaller, yes? What's the way you do it? Lower your confidence, right? Because as Emily correctly said back there, if type 1 error goes down, type 2 error goes up. And the converse is true. If you want type 2 error to come down, you better make type 1 go up. And the only way you make type 1 error go up is by lowering confidence. Lowering confidence. I know that goes against what you've been studying in here, right? Why would you lower confidence? Because confidence intervals ignore type 2 error. That's the unfortunateness with confidence. They ignore type 2 error. They only look at type 1 error. So that's why Carly's point 3 weeks ago, just make confidence off the chart. Well, yeah, except that makes type 2 error off the chart as well. And if a false negative is what you want to avoid, you might want to drop your confidence to 90% or something like that. Does that make sense? Like from a holistic point of view. Everything else is number crunching. But holistically, you got to decide up front which one you'd rather avoid. And then adjust your results accordingly. That fair? Okay, good. I like to then, from this point on the template, just deal with 5%, a cutoff of 5%, because that's what the journals still do. But I at least want to plant that seed in your minds about which error is worse and how you can avoid it. Because it's one of those unfortunate things that just gets flushed by the wayside. Ready? Okay, here we go. We now have to... We did Y, right? Okay, which distribution? We're still using a Z distribution, aren't we? We're still using a Z, unless you guys want to make an Excel spreadsheet. I got no problem you doing that. No, we don't want to do that right now. You really? Let me ask a parallel question. If we had the opportunity to have this class in a computer lab, would you like to run Excel spreadsheet? Would you like to build those in class like we were doing up there? Would that be something you'd be into? Think about that. It's a question I'm going to ask you later on a survey because I'm trying to steer this class maybe towards there. Shelby's like, Jesus, just get me through the last 5 weeks. But I'm going to ask